Tunes.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to 2030 Insight Live. First of all, a very warm welcome to all of our guests here in the room in Nairobi in Kenya. We're here, good to see you. And a very warm welcome if you're tuning in live. Thank you to guests from around the world, or if you're catching up as well. I'm Ollie Barrett, an honor to be one of your co-hosts here over the couple of days. It's been an action-packed morning already. This session is, as Jerry Maguire would have said, all about show me the money. It's about financing for eye health, maximizing public, private, and philanthropic investment. Will you, by show of hands, raise your hand if a part of your role right now involves bringing in money, finance into your organization? Who has this top of mind? Okay, well over half the room, probably 2/3 of the room. Good. I see why we've been united. Well, the good news is I get to be a co-pilot for this session with somebody who leads one of our fantastic host partners here in Kenya, and that is the Fred Hollows Foundation, which needs almost no introduction. The individual who leads Fred Hollows, as you will already know, is its chief executive. So please give a warm IAPB welcome to Ross Piper, everybody.
Thanks, Ollie.
Afternoon, Ross.
Afternoon, Ollie.
I should probably say good day.
You can say good day, always.
I'm very envious, though. You're based in Sydney.
Although it's a bit colder. It's warmer here at the moment in Sydney,
okay.
so yeah.
Well, look, thank you. Now, speaking of where you're based, Ross, we all know Fred Hollows, but that's not going to stop us recapping on some of your good work. However, you're relatively new in the pilot seat.
Correct. So just over, I can't say I'm new anymore, about 14 months. Yeah. So still learning, but amazing to be back in the sector.
Yeah, and so we're going to get onto some of those reflections. But what I did notice doing my homework was that I wouldn't say zigzagging, but your career has certainly spanned different worlds.
Yeah, look, I often reflect, I mean, very few of us have a linear career path, but my life prior to coming into the Fred Hollows Foundation, I was running a very large ethical pension fund in Australia. And so probably the easiest way to describe my professional journey is half my life has been on the commercial side, worked with an investment bank for many years. The other half of my life in development, serving in the Middle East and Eastern Europe for a number of years, and then earlier in the former Yugoslavia. And in fact, I started my career in remote Indigenous Australia.
Right, so let's just take one step back, though. With the previous hat on, this is an ethical pension fund, so multi-billion dollars.
Yeah, we're about a $15 billion fund, yep.
And those pension holders are thinking, A, is my money safe with you? And are you going to do the right thing for the world, for the planet, for society? To what extent would some of the organizations in this room have been on your radar or close to your radar with your previous hat on?
It's a really good question. I mean, why we're here today, we see a number of shifts that are going on globally. Of course, the retreat on ODA, and we don't see that trend shifting anytime soon. But conversely, on the other side, you see these investment or capital markets that are growing at an exponential rate, but increasingly looking for places to invest that will generate an appropriate return and an appropriate risk profile. I think for a pension funds typically are more conservative, they're long-term investors. Although our fund, interestingly, we were, as I say, about a $15 billion fund. We had a probably circa $500 or $600 million asset class called impact investing. And that was a very diverse set of investments. We took equity, we had debt, we were fund of funds. There are a whole range of different modalities for that. Interestingly for us, we had about 130,000 members in Australia who care deeply about their money. Yeah. They want effective fees, they want good returns, but the why and the opportunity to do more with their capital was really profound. And so there's a really interesting convergence of opportunity for the development sector and the institutional market sector. We've just got to work out how we can bridge those two areas effectively.
Right, so that theme of bridging is definitely, I think, going to run through this session. I want to quiz you a little bit on what Fred Hollows is doing, because you are starting to act in these different ways, for sure, so you're definitely walking the talk on that. Why does this session matter? What are we really trying to get out of it, and how have we designed it?
Well, I think if we're all in the business of trying to eliminate preventable blindness around the world, clearly you need capital to do that. And my reflection, in fact, when I joined that pension fund, I'd spent the prior 5 years living and working in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. And whilst we recognise that the philanthropic dollar, or ODA, is hugely important, in fact, it's what enables our work, the reality is that that quantum of money is a drop in a bucket compared to institutional markets. And so for me, and you might have heard of the growing area called impact investing, that we can have a great conversation about that. It means many different things to different people. But there's no question that there is a growing opportunity to access institutional capital to enable and power the work that we do. So why are we here? Because we're in the business of impact, but we need to fund what we're actually doing, and we need to fund it sustainably. But that requires us to think differently about how we work. There's interesting questions around the capabilities we need in an organisation to do that well. But I guess as I see this emerging dynamic of ODA retreating, organisations are always trying to think about how and where we access more philanthropic capital, there's a really profound and growing opportunity thinking about how you access institutional capital, and in fact how you get the private sector actively engaged in what we're actually doing.
Right, now I want to be crystal clear. When you say ODA in this context, what do you mean?
So overseas development assistance.
Right,
so foreign aid, basically.
Yeah, and let's be honest, the dismantling of certain of those frameworks completely.
Yeah, correct. And we've seen that obviously most pronounced in the US, but certainly other markets, UK, Europe, etc., has seen a reduction. Australia, interestingly, has held the line, although it's still probably at a historically low point. And so we've got to think about diverse ways to access capital, or different ways to access capital. And I think for us in the Fred Hollows Foundation, there's a clear recognition that business as usual, whilst we do hopefully very impactful work around the world, actually isn't going to cut it. It's not going to solve the issues that we're trying to do. So we've got to think differently.
So on that, to crystallise a couple of the ideas you've already shared. One is the idea of what might be considered traditionally, we would say in the UK, third sector organisations acting differently. And that could mean that they become funders themselves. They could become literal investors themselves. It could, of course, also mean, and we might come on to this, they develop new products and services which become investable by some of that impact investment. Give us a glimpse of what you're doing at Fred Hollows.
Sure. So it's interesting, we are very thankful to have a very diverse range of supporters around the world and a diverse mix of funding sources. For us, I guess historically there's always been a view of how do you think with a bit of courage and boldness about the work that we do, and how can we amplify or multiply the work we do by thinking about blended finance. Historically, Fred Hollows Foundation, Sightsavers and others were involved in a development impact bond in Cameroon. Some good learnings came through that. We've done some social enterprise investment with a social bank in, social hospital in Vietnam. And right now we've just implemented the first cohort of what's called an accelerator program here based in Africa. So we are looking to target small or medium-sized enterprises, either technology or hardware related, that we think have the ability to scale quickly, but they need to graduate to a point where they become ready for investment.
Right.
And then coupled with that, we are just actually standing up now a separate part of our strategy that will see us looking at deal-by-deal opportunities to actually invest in promising or emerging technology businesses. We see this as hugely catalytic, and over and above any work we do through our countries or the advocacy, we think that this is a really important element.
Yeah, it's massively important, but just for complete clarity, with that incubator relationship, it's not giving grants, that's investing cash for equity in quite early stage companies.
No, so an accelerator cohort typically is philanthropic. You are seeding grants, but you're trying to bring in business. You're trying to bring businesses to a point where they become potentially investable.
Really good.
So we do that without any obligation that we will invest.
Yeah.
But we think there's a huge opportunity for particularly technology-related businesses. It's moving at light speed. How can we in our work try and be catalytic with that?
Right. I think it's such an important distinction because it's market making, it's development at that grassroots.
The other point you mentioned about supporters, it's interesting. We have obviously very broad supporters for our work. We recognise that there's a very significant opportunity for some supporters who think like investors. And so they may have been very generous with the foundation from a philanthropic standpoint, but they are deeply engaged in the opportunity to think about catalytic capital. So, building out products or offerings. It's interesting how many of our supporters are energized and animated by us thinking differently as an organization about the opportunities with blended finance.
Yeah, I think it's such a marriage to be made there, especially going back to those pension holders and this cause in particular. Ross?
So the only other thing to add briefly, of course, iHealth has this remarkable return on investment. I mean, that's really the compelling story here. So over and above kind of the moral imperative or the equity imperative to do what we do, it has this extraordinary economic imperative that sits behind it. So it is investable. We've just got to build the right instruments to be able to do that. And just very briefly, a comment about this almost clash of cultures, development workers and investors. I sometimes think about it a bit like a dance floor, and on one side you have the NGO workers wearing tie-dyed shirts, singing Kumbaya, trying to save the world. On the other side of that dance floor, the pinstripe suits have turned up, and they are there in volume. Now, these two groups are trying to work out, how do we dance together? So there's a really interesting capability question.
Well, there's a metaphor for us for today. Step one, take your tie off. I'm working on it. Ross, you're one step ahead of me. Ross Piper, I ask two favors. Will you join one of our conversations, and will you be our keynote listener for this next session?
No problem.
Thank you. Ross Piper, everybody. Thank you, Ross. Right. Let's bring up three really interesting case studies of how money moves in very different ways. Let's welcome up, I'll introduce them properly, but give it up for Amos, for Abby, and for David, everybody. Come on up and join us. We do Amos here, Abby, David. There you go, welcome everybody. So we're joined, if you're just tuning in, this is all about financing iHealth. We're joined by Amos Bonner from Opportunity Bank Uganda. This is all about financial inclusion, and we're going to hear more from each of them in a minute. Amos, welcome. Abby Steinberg from LIF, that's the Livelihood Impact Fund. Specifically, I think, Abby, the executive director of the Eyeglasses Initiative within that organization. So 25 plus organizations, as we will hear. David Munyendo is with another one of our co-hosts through his role at CBM in Kenya as the country director. Let's have a round of applause for all of them. Welcome. I'm only going to ask for a couple of minutes. And I'll start with you, Abby, if that's all right, just about your work, and we'll get on to lessons learned, but I really want our guests here to have a really clear picture of what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I've been talking a lot over the last couple of days. There's some remarkable people here. So Livelihood Impact Fund got started only about 4 years ago, and we joined this really exciting, vibrant sector. And we really wanted to understand, wait, if 1.8 billion people have presbyopia or the inability to see up close, why does the 800 million still not have access to reading glasses or near vision glasses? Mm-hmm. And that kind of took us on this long journey to say, what is the most cost-effective way to move glasses from factories to face? And how do we really thoughtfully think about how we shape the market through public and private sector channels? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to deploy philanthropic capital really smart, but we also want to create sustainability within these communities. We want to give people an access to glasses through trusted channels like their community health network or primary care facilities. When they turn up for diabetes screening, they should also be able to get a vision exam. And when they go to their local pharmacy, they should be able to, purchase the latest and greatest in terms of near vision glasses. And that's kind of where our journey began. And then as we've expanded, we've realized that if we don't work towards policy, unlocking insurance, and other financing mechanisms on the ground, it'll be harder to sustain these initiatives. We have been surprised, though, after working with the Nigerian government across 10 states, reaching over 1.5 million people, all of the states have found money to either resource a position, continue training, or procure their own glasses. And so what is also exciting is that we're seeing how can we work with governments a bit top-down to say what are sustainable long-term policies and financing that can support it, and bottom-up, how can we really help grassroots organizations, both in the nonprofit side, intergovernmental and governmental side, but also private sector to sustain the local market.
Right, so Abby, super quick questions. I want us all to be crystal clear. At your core, are you about giving people money or giving people glasses? What's the primary function of what you're doing?
We like to make it complicated. It is two things. We give great organizations money, about 25 different organizations we've worked with across 19 countries, and we give them money for cost-effective delivery of glasses.
Got it.
And then in some cases, we give glasses.
Okay, got it. No, that's very helpful, thank you. And then you hinted there with some thoughts on insurance products. Give us a sense of a way of financing your work that is relatively new, but is actually working out. I'm just trying to understand how this field is evolving. In terms
Very
of how
much so. Well, I'm not going to touch too much on what Amos here is going to share about Uganda, but there's very unique, I used to work in finance across East and West Africa, and there are really unique ways to think about financing. So one, there could be bundling within existing services or care. So in Nigeria, we worked with a diagnostic center to bundle in eye screening and provision of glasses into existing diagnostics that were already being paid for by HMOs and insurance. In India, we're working with Peak Vision on a cross-subsidy model to say, how do we scale access to cataracts? But if you're screening individuals in the same population, how do you also provide near vision and near vision spectacles? In Uganda, we have the joy of working on a new financing mechanism. And then we also think about how do we unlock capital or reframe or work with insurance providers to make the terms more accessible.
Yeah, it was such a powerful thought, that idea of bundling. And there's a rhyme even with our communications work where we say who already has the attention, who already has the audience, and can we smuggle our message in with them?
You got it.
They're looking at future partners as well. Amos, Abby didn't steal your thunder there. So here we go. This is very interesting. I saw a phrase which I haven't been able to forget. I'm going to let you say it. Tell us about the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much. At Opportunity, my name is Amos Bona. I'm the Chief Relationship Officer. We've been in Uganda for 30 years, and we do blend financial and non-financial services. At Opportunity, we believe the health of our customers is paramount for financial inclusion to work. So what do? We focus on women, youth, persons with disabilities, and the refugees. We're among the few institutions that lend to refugees because we believe these are financially excluded. So what do? We go to the hopeless and we give people hope, transform lives, and create impact in the communities. How do we do it? We go with partners, build models, starting with what the customers know. We build on what they believe in. We co-create products together to serve them. So we don't take a supply-based approach, we use a demand-driven. So we do human-centered design approach of product development. And now we have See Now, Pay Later, which is the product that brings us to this day. At Opportunity, a blind person has hope, has a future, can now see now and pay later. Because, ladies and gentlemen, in the Bible, the story of Bartimaeus reminds us, when he asked, what can I do for you? He said, let me see again.
Right.
And he got his sight back. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is what keeps us awake.
This is amazing. So see now, pay later. And just if we go back to the history, to what extent was eye health in your DNA? Were you, in my words, a traditional bank beforehand, or is this supporting eye health by design? Just help us understand how it all came about.
So we serve persons with disabilities. Eye health wasn't part of the disabilities we're focusing on. We have, and the PWDs mainly borrow through village saving and loan associations, groups. So with the help of Peak Vision, 2 years ago, we sat down, co-created a product and said, what about the individual in the community who can't go to the group, who has lost hope, culture has thrown them out, family has thrown them out, they look like an outcast. What do we do for them? Yeah. So we developed a product for the individual specific. Now it has two folds. Either the borrower, who is the blind person, is given an opportunity to borrow. We give them a grace period. Then when they start working, they start paying the loan.
Right.
Option two, a beneficiary or a benefactor or a relative of the blind person with a cash flow borrows on behalf of the blind person to allow the blind see. And what has happened, we've seen increase in productivity of income at the household level.
Brilliant. It's an amazing, I think it deserves a round of applause. That's such a very, very interesting product. See now, pay later. Thank you, Amos. David, tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Oli. I'm David Munyendo. I'm the country director for CBM Kenya. CBM is almost 116 years old globally, and we exist to improve the quality of life of persons with disability. We do this through partnership because we believe that we can break the cycle between poverty and disability when we work collaboratively. We believe it's also possible to achieve better systems, better capacities when we work together and achieve better outcomes. Yep. Eye health is part of our DNA from the founding philosophies of Pastor Ernest Christoffel. We work through a lot of thematic areas, but what I want to say this time is that we need to shift our focus from working for others, but working for ourselves. Because in disability, it's an open club, and you can join anytime. So whatever we do is to break barriers that limit access to opportunities and services and all that is required for one to achieve their full potential. And we know very well that the most vulnerable are the most excluded, in particular, persons with disabilities. And in particular, when it comes to finances, this is very clear in our head that as we focus on providing the daily needs of individuals, we need to address barriers. And we have done this through different approaches. One, by focusing on individual empowerment, just like what Amos said. When you empower the individual, either through access to education, access to employment, or access to income, then we empower their future, we empower their families, and empower the entire communities. We also work with the governments to ensure that we have reforms in policies to be more disability inclusive, and to ensure that even budgeting is more disability friendly. And I'm very proud that when you do this, the impact is much more than what you can achieve as an individual.
Right.
So as CBM, we believe in that.
Right, it certainly is more powerful. So on that word access, whether it's to employment, education, finance, if I asked you to pick one example of how you open up access to one of those, what example would you shine a light on?
I'll pick on access on finance because we're talking about financing. And there are so many models, and for CBM, we get our grants from individuals, from philanthropists, and even from institutional donors. So we believe that if we don't create sustainable solutions, then we shall keep on giving the fish instead of teaching people how to fish.
Yes.
So for individuals, at a community level, we mobilize them to be in groups, and most of them start income-generating activities. So I'm very well sold to Amos' story.
Yeah.
And when they do that, they can generate their own money, and then they can pay premiums for insurance. In government, we also advocate for governments to be more inclusive in budgeting and planning,
right,
to ensure that they can ring-fence resources towards disability services. So it's possible that you can also use a twin-track approach on the individual and equally on the system that can unlock opportunities for that.
Right, thank you, David. Now, this time is whistling by. We have to be pithy, everybody. What I'm going to ask for, and we can weave you in, I think, later in the session, but I'm going to ask us as to the lesson that you've learned. And although we're streaming, we're amongst friends. So, Abby, something you wish you'd known, a lesson to share with the group, if that would be reasonable.
Lessons I've learned. One, the work we could do is only possible because of all these remarkable people in the room who have been doing this for decades and have put it on UN agenda, WHO's agenda, have begun to elevate this globally. So we know we cannot move as fast as we are if you had not laid the groundwork. Two, there's more excitement and appetite for this than we had anticipated. Though it is hard to get financing in governments and government engagement, the second we put glasses on faces is quite transformative both for the officials and for the individuals. Even in Nigeria, under Jigibola 2.0, which is an initiative under the president of Nigeria, we had someone in a remote part of Nigeria say, this is the first physical thing I really feel like I got from my government. And the more government hears that, the more they're excited about really engaging and investing.
And then, this is very much putting you on the spot. I know, Abby, if I was to explore the workshop of what's in development, if you'd like, so I'm almost hinting at a product, something you'd like to develop, but might involve future partners, because these are future collaborators, right? So where would you like to go next?
We'd love more opportunities to bundle into existing care pathways that are already funded or have insurance. One unique thing we found in Ethiopia is people were showing up for glasses and then willing to receive other eye health services. We hope the associations in optometry and ophthalmology understand when people get near vision basic screening, even from a community health worker, we're seeing like 90+% of them show up for subsequent care.
Right. Right, really helpful. David, let's get a lesson from you and then Amos.
Okay, I'll talk about the issues of how we can build partnerships around financing. Because in most cases, you think that a given community is so poor that they cannot give nothing in return. They're all rich in their own way. So in financing, it's not about money, but it's about resources.
Yeah.
What else can somebody offer in return that can lower the operating cost to improve access to services? And there's a lot in that area.
It's such an interesting point. We might come back, I'm sure we will come back to this around the power of social capital, existing networks and frameworks, really powerful. Amos, a lesson for our peers.
The biggest lesson is you cannot do it alone. The power of partnerships and like-minded partnerships is very critical for these blended financing models to work. We are here speaking of the success of See Now, Pay Later, because Peak Vision believed in it. Dr. Runga's hospital believed in it. The kingdom of the local place where we did the pilot believed in it, and the bank believed in it. So once we do collaborative partnerships, and we customize the solutions to the different cultural settings, then we have everything to go.
And who would be a dream partner in future? Anyone you'd love to work more with?
The World Bank.
The World Bank. Right. We'll try our best. For you, will you, first of all, stay where you are for 1 minute, everyone. Will you give our 3 guests a round of applause, please? And if I just borrow from you, Abby, stay where you are. Ross, would you just be upstanding for 1 second? Let's just get, Ross, let's get your quick reflection from this initial panel, because I know we've got more that we want to introduce our guests to, but just sort of a flash reaction, because this has definitely got the minds whirring.
So firstly, thank you. Three such profound examples that have been provided. I think the call out around the power of learning and collaboration, there are many different strategies, and it's so important as a sector that we are learning together. Let's not all reinvent the wheel at the same time. So I'm really encouraged by what's been shared. And spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the World Bank in part 2, so thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so on that note, Ross, stay with us. Have a seat, by the way. Why don't we turn, and feel free to do this if we're chatting online as well, but why doesn't everybody here in Nairobi just turn to your neighbor, and I want one reflection from our 3 amazing case studies, and then we'll take a question or 2 if we've got time. Let's just reflect with our neighbor on what we've heard. Thank you very much, panel. Stay where you are. Have a quick... I wasn't sure.
Pleasure to meet you.
Icing on our cake. It developed from a succeed, so we worked together.
No, that's really amazing. Yeah, thank you. Yes. And I've always worked with the 4 main.
One of the critical was George.
Okay, everybody. Welcome back. So we've got just, we're going to introduce you to another round of really interesting provocateurs in a minute. But while we've got our guests here, who's got a question? There's no such thing as, quotes, a silly question at 2030 Insight Live. We come from very different worlds and sectors. So if you have a question, it could be to clarify, it could be about somebody's work. I see just in our second row, it's lovely to see you. We'll run a mic down to you. For our online audience, however loud your voice may be, if you'll wait for the mic, lovely to see you.
Thanks, Ollie. For the gentleman from the Opportunity Bank, just wondering in terms of the experience with how many people were able to pay back the loan that have had the surgery? Like, what was the percentage of people that paid it off within the prescribed period?
Thank you very much. Our default rate is under 3%. But the good news is there was a blended financing model, so it has a line of credit, so that you discount the interest you're going to lend to. It has a de-risking mechanism. If they default, there's someone to hold you, and then it has data that follows. That's why the NPLs have remained very low, because there's a de-risking mechanism in this model. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I mean, microfinance is obviously a whole separate conversation, lots and lots of learnings, but when it's done well, the majority of microfinance organisations I've seen would have a default rate that most Western banks would dream of. So actually, because of the design, it's actually very, very strong.
Okay, but just for my benefit then, Amos, if that's a default rate of 3%, how would that start to compare versus lending an individual money not for sight, but for a car or for something that was related to something else in their life?
The difference is you work with the customer under such models. So it's patience, it's time, you train and retrain. So by the time you finish financial literacy trainings and they take the loan, they know when to borrow, why to borrow, and why they should pay back. Now, the one who comes for a retail loan for a motor vehicle, either they have a known source of income that is cash, so the value and the value at risk is higher for someone with a known source of income than someone who's seeing an opportunity out of the opportunity of giving.
Focusing on market-based approaches. My question is, you mentioned, Abby, about Nigeria, and that they've impacted already 1.5 million people in Nigeria. That's amazing. Could you unpack a little bit more in how much time that took, and also what was the initial investment?
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Nigeria, we deployed in partnership with the Nigerian government. Dr. Okalo, who might be here, she's at the conference, who leads eye healthcare for the country, Chai, Restoring Vision, and several other partners, and Chan as well. So the 1.5 was distributed actually a bit over a year it took across 10 states. And the goal was a cascade training and training within primary healthcare facilities so that individuals could go both to the primary healthcare and receive it within their community. So they were free of cost with basic eye screening and a referral mechanism to ensure continuity of care for other eye health conditions.
Great, thank you. Excellent question. Thank you, Abby, for being so succinct. So two things. First of all, will you please join me in thanking Amos and Abby and David very much indeed as they leave the stage. Thank you, all three of you. Ross, if you could stay with us for a second. Please, thank you very much indeed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask our next three guests to come and take a seat, but while they do, why don't you exchange just one final reflection, because I really want to internalize some of these conversations in the room with your neighbor about that section, and then I'll introduce you to our next three guests. Let's take 30 seconds or a minute. Thank you. Hey, Jess, would you mind going down? Very good. Right. Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's 2030 Insight Live. We're live in Nairobi. Welcome if you're online or if you're catching up. And by the way, do feel free to ask questions if you're online. I'll do my best to keep an eye across that. I'm Ollie, your co-host for some of these sessions. And what we've got is another three brilliant guests, or four brilliant guests, to share some of their perspectives. What I've already noticed is that these conversations improve the more questions we get from you in the room and online. So thanks in advance. Who's joining us on stage? Somebody whose organization's been name-checked, I think 4 or 5 times already. Dr. Andrew Bastaros is, well, first and foremost, an ophthalmologist. Let's not forget, a professor of global eye health from the London School, but also an entrepreneur, co-founder and CEO of Peak Vision, and the co-founder, more of this shortly, of the Vision Catalyst Fund. We've been following that with great interest. Welcome, Andrew. Next to you is Anthony Gittau from J&J Business, so a hugely respected corporation, also investing as well. So we're going to hear a bit more about this, Anthony, but specifically you're Director of Program Delivery and Impact for Africa and the Middle East at J&J. That's Johnson & Johnson. Welcome, Anthony. Jess needs very little introduction. Jess Thompson, and Jess is the Deputy Chief Executive at the IAPB and has been very instrumental on everything, on campaigning, policy, everything else besides. So it's always great to work with you. Thank you for joining us, Jess. You're joining me. You're our helicopter view as well in this session because you get to see the good work across the membership. And I remain joined by Ross Piper, who leads the Fred Hollows Foundation. Let's have a round of applause for them all. Thank you.
Technology and partnerships is that people are invisible in the community. We don't know who they are. They don't know where services are. And we have spent over a decade building a system to help identify and connect people to services at scale.
So let's click the Zoom one more. How?
So we have built the capability for non-health workers to provide health level eye checks at home or in the school. But more critically, we realized that knowing someone had vision loss did not mean they got treated. So typically, 4 in every 5 people referred for services. So these are people with known eye health sent to somewhere that can treat them, don't make it.
Yeah.
So the last decade has been really focused on optimizing the patient journey, which is referral pathways, looking at helping our partners have data insights, behavioral nudges through things like SMS messages.
Got it.
And we've learned some pretty critical lessons on that journey in terms of why it doesn't always work.
Right, so lots on there about human relationships, and we're going to unpick a bit about the financing as well. Right, very quickly, and I'm afraid I can't give this treatment to everyone, I'm afraid. Hat number 2, Vision Catalyst Fund. Give us the elevator pitch.
So it relates to what we've learned with Peak. So there's 5 things that mean people don't access care. They're not aware. They don't know where availability is. They can't access it. It's not attractive. And then the final frontier has always been affordability. Yeah. So our market within Peak has always been our NGO partners, which is dependent on the philanthropy sector. So we saw a number of years ago that the potential impact we could make with Peak was always going to be limited by the amount of philanthropic capital in the system, which has always been chronically under-resourced. We're in a slightly paradoxical position at the moment where there's more philanthropy in eye care than there ever has been. However, it's nowhere near the amount needed. And so the vision 8 years ago was that we needed to change who was asking about eye care. So many in this room will be familiar that a national eye care coordinator will work incredibly hard building partnerships. Partnership is critical because like the WHO is with the Ministers of Health, World Bank is with Ministers of Finance.
Right, so I want to hear more about a milestone you've just crossed this week, so we'll come to that. But Jess, what Andrew's saying really rhymes, doesn't it? Because that conversation between ministers is about the value of vision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we all know, eye health has been really poorly integrated, both in health systems, but also in financing frameworks, both multilaterally and domestically. And we know that in many low and middle income countries, eye health receives less than 1% of domestic health budgets. I think one of the strongest lessons that we've learned over development financing over decades is that the strongest health investments are those that work through country systems, align with national plans, and support government ownership. So that means we need to see eye health better integrated into primary health care, but also through universal health coverage packages, through social insurance schemes, and through domestic budgets. And I think what that means is exactly what Andrew is saying. We fundamentally need to change who is in the room. So we need to engage beyond ministries of health and really convince ministries of finance that this is a return on investment that is worth investing in.
So it is about seeing that bigger picture, isn't it? Because Anthony, we'll hear about J&J just very momentarily. Ross, what Andrew is highlighting here is that, relatively speaking, those sums of philanthropic capital don't even compare to those deep, deep pools of, in one specific example, pension fund capital.
I mean, I always ask the question, we talk about ending avoidable blindness, what would it cost? You know, I don't know if that work's ever been done, but it would be a significant number, but probably relatively modest in the broader scheme of things. So how do we think aspirationally? I think the power of something like the Vision Catalyst Fund is that it activates a different way of thinking. It's not about individual organisations raising money per se. This is a systems change, but has enormous potential to generate a quantum of investment, the likes of which we haven't seen before through governments.
So we need to start to explore how very different sorts of organisation work better together. But Anthony, just give us a sense of how you fit into this space. You're a very well-regarded business in your own right, but you're also investing.
Yes, and I think the other component of it is the power of a company like Johnson & Johnson is, first of all, we innovate on products, right? So we come to this in different ways. One is we bring the products that are needed and make them accessible. So since 2020, I think we've invested and delivered about $100 million worth of product that is required by people who need it. The second component then is the philanthropic side, where through our foundation, we then fund organizations that are working in the field to screen and link patients to care and support them also when they're providing the services. The third component of this is an impact investment. Since 2019, Johnson & Johnson launched the Johnson & Johnson Impact Ventures. And this basically focuses on what Ross was speaking about, is there are organizations, social enterprises out there that are building models that can really improve access to care, but they are not typically in need of grant funding and actually require investment to scale. And this is where I think when we're able to get a business to that level, we start unlocking quantum amounts of resources to make it happen.
And on that investment front, is there an example you can give of the sort of business you've funded? Is this very much seed investment? Would you consider yourself more aligned to a corporate venture capital unit? Just give us a sense of the scale and an example, if you're allowed.
And I must give a disclaimer, I'm the least financial person in the room, but I'll give it a try. So we don't go for seed investments. We basically focus on businesses that are post-profit and that are able to deliver revenues above $100,000 a year and are looking for $500,000 and above in terms of investment. So this means that they already have proof of concept, they are getting ready for scale.
Right. And then just finally, in terms of those different ways of moving money, on the grant-making side, to what extent is that sector-specific? In other words, is there a world in which you are giving grants to private sector organizations?
Yes, because we focus on how are we delivering the impact, not who is delivering the impact. So if Peak Vision comes and if they're a social enterprise and not an NGO, for example, and they're able to prove to us that their model can deliver the impact we're looking for, we'll work with them. If an NGO comes to us and their model works, then we do that. But what we've seen of late that I think is more important is how do we bring all of this together into a platform approach, right? Because everyone in the ecosystem has a very unique skill set or a unique way they're contributing. It's only by bringing this together that we are able to then really unlock the success that
Right, so we'll get more reflections on this, and we're going to have time for questions, by the way. But just very quickly, just to flip it around, Andrew, how do you then navigate that? Because as an entrepreneur, you're often leading the investment process. Are you making a beeline for Anthony's colleague on the grant side? I haven't met that many entrepreneurs who would turn down a grant for no equity. Or are you saying that this is a very different order conversation? Let's talk to your investment unit.
So Peak is a non-profit, so we can't take investment. One of the learnings is we've been approached for many years being offered investment. And that, for me, was one of the light bulb moments, is there is a lot more money out there than the grant pool that we are needing to build Peak. And so we're not looking to raise money for Peak, but we are looking to raise money for the sector and for our partners utilizing Peak. Because what we've seen, such as the See Now, Pay Later scheme, is that ability to verify something has happened is crucial to create the accountability that something gets financed. So to be able to find and connect someone and the hospital say that they've been there, but also independently verified by Peak has been important in terms of Opportunity Bank being able to, to fund that. So it's often been around understanding a language which was not familiar to me. I've had to, and I'm still not that familiar with it. I'm, learning as I go.
Now, I mean, aren't we all, Andrew? But just this brings us on to that wider subject of, and Ross painted a very vivid image of the dance floor earlier, but this is about very different potential partners learning to work better together. How are you seeing that play out? You spent time in different corridors of power in Washington, in Geneva, over the last 12 months. How's this starting to play out across the sector, different ways of financing?
Well, I'm very pleased to embody Ross's example today in that I think I perfectly encapsulate pinstripe meeting high day.
That's true.
So, yeah, I mean, look, iHealth, I think, sits at the intersection between health, human capital development, and economic productivity. And Ross said it so well. There are few areas where you have such economic impact, right? So we know every dollar invested in iHealth yields a $28 return, but also where the private sector plays such a pivotal role. And that's really interesting because it means for governments, there are policy and fiscal levers that they can implement that really unlock progress, but also create an enabling environment for businesses to enter the market. Because in a lot of situations in iHealth, it is fundamentally a market failure, and that's what we're trying to solve. Andrew and I spent a lot of time a couple of months ago at the World Bank spring meetings, and I was really struck by, frankly, the parallels that exist between iHealth and the World Bank's strategic focus on jobs and job creation. And we can think about iHealth and jobs in a number of ways. We can think about the ways in which we can get people who have vision impairment back into the workforce. So our investment case tells us that actually if we reach the 1 billion people, we would see 22 million more people back into the workforce every year. We can think about it as actually if we reduce the caregiving burden for people who are looking after those with vision impairment, then we would get those people back in the workforce. We can also think about productivity in the workforce, and we can think about the eye care workforce itself.
But that's what's so inspiring. If you think about the Amos example or the Uganda example of see now, pay later, imagine embedding that as a thought in the mind of every work and pensions minister in the world. It is absolutely phenomenal what it could unlock. So here are a couple of, we'll get some questions in 2 minutes' time. I'm going to put a couple of imaginary questions, but I think they're relative. Hopefully, you be the judge. They have some validity. Ross, what do you say to the audience member who says, you as an incredibly renowned eye health charity have a capacity to invest, to deploy capital into some impact investment opportunities? The only problem is, historically, you don't know anything about investing in the traditional sense. There's a challenge there and an opportunity. How are you going to fix it?
So, I mean, it sort of speaks to my, I think, point earlier about this capacity that I think we need to build as a sector. I think we've had a false binary in the past that somehow, development good, private sector is bad. My strong conviction is that these two circles are coming closer. They're never going to overlap entirely. We have a social purpose and a social mission. We want to reach the most vulnerable, but actually the overlap or the adjacency of private sector is hugely important. So, but again, to build out, Venn diagram, that middle ground there's a capability, there's a muscle, there's a literacy that needs to understand the mechanics of investment, but also understand development. Because right now the pinstripe suits and the tie-dyed, they don't really speak the same language. But there is a profound opportunity, and I think we were talking before about impact investing. So however you measure it, the pooled funds globally sitting in what we call impact funds at the moment, $1.5 trillion, and growing at a quantum every single day. So that's a profound opportunity for this sector, but we have to think a little differently to our traditional models.
So in that case, let's put, Andrew may have heard this one before. Andrew, somebody puts it to you, you could have raised more money and had more impact had you been differently formed. What do you say to them?
We've had that many times. I also want to come back to something very important Ross said. So I will answer your question, I'm going to be a bit of a politician and answer the question I want to answer, if that's all right. Just this question of language. In eye care, we're very good at talking about eye care. We're getting much better, I think, at talking language of others. And I just want to make a distinction between economics and finance. So the conversation with Opportunity Bank was not an economic question. An ROI of $1 in, $28 out doesn't matter to the bank because it's about cash flow. Where is that $28 going to come back into an account that means this is a exceptional model? No, it doesn't. But it does matter to the World Bank.
Yes.
Because they can think on a 20-year horizon.
Yeah.
So a financing question, the evidence there from work by my colleagues at the International Centre for Eye Health was the cataract impact study showed when someone had their sight restored, the household income grew over the course of a year. When I looked at how much it grew, it was more than the cost of surgery. So that's where the language mattered, and I think we're getting better at translating our understanding of data to what matters to our audiences. Yeah. And I'm conscious if you want me, I can answer your
Of course we want you to answer it, yeah.
So the answer, the choice we took, and I don't know if it's the right answer, but we, at the point of Peak spinning out from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, there was a question about would we be a for-profit, a non-profit, and we were getting investment offers, and we had no real track record at that point. The reason we didn't is I struggled to really get comfortable with aligning investors with the impact.
Yes.
I didn't believe that ultimately there wouldn't come a day where we'd always have to make the choice that meant the most marginalized were still left behind. And so we've built a model where it's meant we've had to go slower, painful conversations about the cost of Peak and all of these things.
And you've already explained, Andrew, we're in a different world now.
Yeah, and we haven't compromised, and that's the one thing we won't compromise.
Right. Anthony, a piece of advice we've joined by some amazing corporate partners here and tuning in. A corporation that's saying, okay, this is inspiring because you're innovating with your products, you have philanthropy, and you're also making investments. We want to start on this journey with the recipients being in eye health. What advice would you give them?
So I think, first of all, it's what's the mission and what difference are you making in the world with this? I think, and that is what has driven J&J, because our credo really speaks to, at the center of it, the patient, the community, and the health workers that serve them. So if that is your focus and you really want to make a difference, that is where you start. You must have a compelling vision, because then that helps align everything in the organization towards that. And it helps you to then ensure that as you innovate products, you're looking with the patient at the center. As you are making money, you know you need to put some money away because there's some patients or some communities that you must reach with philanthropy. And then you must be conscious to put some resources away to say, if then Peak Vision decides to be a social enterprise, we must be ready to be there for that kind of opportunity. But I think most of all is you must also see yourself as a catalyst, because every corporation goes through cycles and sometimes priorities change. So how do we work with this ecosystem and unlock potentials? Like today morning, I was so inspired by the Cabinet Secretary saying in 18 months, the Social Health Authority has provided $1 billion of Kenyan shillings for ophthalmology.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's what you must do.
And I thought that about the Bloomberg Philanthropies commitments initially spanning those 2 years, that catalyzed, that galvanizes, says let's get on with it. Let's take some questions, some observations. What's not been touched on? Adam, I see. Let's get a mic into the front row and wave your hand if I can spot you. If you've got a point you'd like to make, a question, something that's not come up yet and you were secretly hoping it would. We're hopefully making our way to you, otherwise I will run a... Here we go, thank you very much. Other questions?
Thanks, Ollie. Great interventions from all the panels, so thank you. My name's Adam Askew, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Vision Catalyst Fund. My question's for Ross. We've been very lucky to have 3 investors up front who have made the partnership with the World Bank possible: Fred Hollows Foundation, CBM, and Cure Blindness. And I just wanted to ask Ross, you know, so not hear it from me and Andrew and others, it's what compelled you to make this first investment as the Fred Hollows Foundation.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So just very briefly, there's always risk here, but as I said earlier, I think there's a clear recognition for us that business as usual as good and noble as that is actually not going to solve the problem we're seeking to change. And so there's almost an underlying premise that says we've got to think differently. The Vision Catalyst Fund is a profound opportunity to engage, an institution that has the potential to be hugely catalytic. It's not without risk, of course, but we, I think, had a firm view that this is one of many potential opportunities that help genuinely catalyse the level of investment coming into our sector. So it was a fairly easy decision. And I was a relatively new CEO, so it's easy to make decisions early before I get blamed for them. But our board were very supportive, and our team were very supportive as well.
And Adam, I don't want guests to leave. If we stick with Adam for one sec, with any question in their mind. So how would you distill what you're doing with the Vision Catalyst Fund, especially for someone outside the room, outside the sector? And feel free to oversimplify, because I just want the nuts and bolts to be crystal clear, because then we can help you take the message.
Thanks, Ollie. Oversimplification won't be a problem for me. So we are a resource mobilisation fund. So our entire job in the ecosystem is to pool lots of different capital coming from lots of different places and pool that money and make it go further and faster. So with the World Bank, the idea is that we pool that capital and we pool that money, we invest it in the bank and make their financing go faster and further and unlock new sources of money for governments to deliver on their priorities. So our role is to be agnostic in terms of the how, but to play a convening and advisory role to support the delivery of it.
I think just briefly, it also gives a very tangible vehicle for governments when they're thinking about making national level commitments. We have the summit this year, so this really gives a framework for governments to be committing at a financial level.
Very powerful. So it's more than it strategically, though, because it's not just catalysing funds. It's about energy, attention, momentum, enthusiasm.
And advising, the bank are starting from a really low knowledge base. Let's be really clear. They have 30 global health compacts out there right now. None of them are mentioning eye care. So we are starting from a low base. We have to be realistic about what we do. But if we embed that and we support governments to build the business case, and the business case is really important, we have to help make the case in government that eye health should be a priority over other things. So that's our job.
Right, and in theory, could the fund accept cash from a major corporation?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm just wondering. Okay, good. Question in the third row here. Feel free to say who you are. You don't have to. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. My name is Christine Schadis, and I work with the Norwegian Association of Blind and Partially Sighted. And I just want to make you aware that the Norwegian government does have an investment fund. It's called Nord Fund, and you should engage with them. Thank you.
That's a great tip-off. Thank you very much. I think round of applause for generosity. This is great. So,
and announce it at the summit.
Exactly. Oh, by the way, Ross, a piece of advice, and we struggle with this a lot in the UK at the moment, how do we unlock the cash in pension funds to be invested in different sorts of equities? Any advice for a guest here who says, surely there's something here in my country?
Yeah, so, it's a whole other ecosystem, pension funds. Australia has a very large, Australia's pension system is the third largest in the world, in fact. So, in fact, there's an appetite to look at alternative types of investments. But pension funds are not going to be doing seed investments in high-risk businesses. They're just not. They'll come in later, proven track record, etc. But I guess the point of building a pipeline of investable businesses, I wouldn't start with the pension funds, though. There are plenty of others and other investors that actively play in this space who understand risks and opportunities, who are impact-minded. But chat to me later. I can make some introductions to pension funds if you're interested. But it's not where I would start.
And all I would say semi-flippantly is that the visionary pension fund would be building for that future.
We were a little bit of an anomaly in the Australian market, largely because of our members who really drove our board and our trustees. Of course, they're heavily regulated, and we're not a charity. We're making market rate risk-adjusted returns, but really trying to prove out a model that you can invest in this way and still meet all of your fiduciary obligations.
Right, thank you. So we're going to pause briefly because we've got a question. We've got work to do in our final 10 minutes. So as we pause, please will you say a huge thank you for now to Andrew, to Anthony, to Jess, and to Ross. Thank you very much indeed. You stay with us. You stay with us for one sec, because we've got a question for you. And you can answer it in one of three or one or all of three ways. Firstly, to the person sitting next to you. Secondly, by putting your hand up in a few minutes' time. But thirdly, if you're on the app, and especially if you're tuning in, but even here in the room, if you're on the app, we're asking you, this is a poll question. Here's the question. We might even see it, but don't worry if we don't. By the time we reconvene at Insight Live 2030, so in 4 years' time, what changes in iHealth financing will demonstrate real progress towards sustainability and inclusion? So put more bluntly, what needs to change? By the time we reconvene in 2030, what changes in iHealth financing will demonstrate real progress towards sustainability and inclusion? Why don't we start just by mulling that with a neighbor, and feel free to get your phones handy so you can be putting it in there. I'll read them out. Or we'll take some in the room as well. I might get a pithy answer from the four of you as well. Let's just take a moment with our neighbor, and we'll reflect on that question. It should be on your phone screens if you're in the app. By the time we reconvene at ISL 2030, what changes in iHealth financing will demonstrate real progress towards sustainability and inclusion? Right. Thanks, Jess. That was ace. Thank you. That's our question, right? I've got a few suggestions. Why not put our panel on the spot in a minute? What I'll try and do is take any from the room. So get ready, put your hands up if you've got one already coming in here. So what changes will demonstrate real progress? Accessible to primary, make it accessible to primary healthcare managers, small funds that will reach directly at the level needed. Thank you to that submission. Remove risk aversion attitude and reach out to fund and involve smaller and local NGOs. Ross, flash take on that. Remove risk aversion attitude. You know where they're coming from, but at the end of the day, they are looking after someone's money.
They are, and it maybe speaks to that question of the modality of NGOs is typically raising money and implementing grants. It's quite a different modality to think as investors, and so that's part of the capability shift that I think if organisations see opportunities here needs to happen.
A few more funds reaching those in need. Couldn't put it more succinctly myself. Investment case, more resources committed for iHealth. Jess, how are we going to get that investment case into even more inboxes? I mean, it's something you must think about all the time. But it isn't just finance ministers; it's CEOs as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, it'd be remiss of me to be on a panel and not talk about the Global Summit for iHealth later this year, but that's obviously a key opportunity for us to secure tangible and concrete financed commitments, both from governments, but also from the private sector, from institutions, and from civil society. So that's the key moment.
Right, so that on investment case. More purposeful collaboration, great one, to access sustainable funding. Here's one, Andrew. Skin in the game, commitments to invest in new financing models and not just to test new funding models. So actually really designing organizations into that. Interesting. Let's take any in the room. If you haven't made your way to the app, would anyone want to have added something to that list? If we go right to the middle of the room, a nice...
Thank you very much. My name is Hannah, and I've forever been in iHealth, 40-something years. What the change I would like to see is that big pharma, those who make the drugs that are needed at that community level, and medical technology that makes the equipment that are needed at that level, introduce innovative ways of still making profits from those who can pay.
Right.
And make products that are affordable to those who pay less.
Yeah, here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Round of applause. That puts the nail on the head for the most voted response here, which is, Ross maybe might speak to this briefly, leverage private sector funding to de-risk the solutions so that public sector can confidently scale up pilots.
Probably not much more to add. I think that's a beautiful aspiration, in fact.
Let's just take a couple more. Thank you.
I'm just going to be a little bit controversial. There's a lot of money in this sector, a lot already, and where are we actually thinking about some sort of collective analysis of where that money is coming into, where it's going, where there's inefficiencies, where we could think about, because ideally, you know, we could get to a place where you've got a percentage of the sector funding going through some of these financing mechanisms to be more catalytic to make that. But I think a first step would have to be the analysis of the current funding within the sector. We did a back of the envelope exercise. It was $1 billion in just one level of our membership every year.
And who might be well placed to conduct such a piece of work?
Yeah, I mean, it could be neutrally led by IAPB, I guess, but obviously using some experts to do that, which is clearly not me.
Right. Deputy Chief Exec's wondering if I'm going to go to her on that. I'm not, but if we take one from the back row, and then we're going to be up against time and get a very final remark from each of you. Thank you. Right in the back row, thank you for being patient.
Thank you very much. I'm coming from the intersection between technology and innovation and implementation for glaucoma patients. And I was wondering if there's a way to join forces between the finance sector and fintech to find ways that perhaps we benefit those who are unable to pay for their services by empowering them in a financial way that they, for example, we have come across patients, young patients that as a result that they were treated, they will not go blind. And suddenly someone wants to start a business of a photocopying machine. Another one went back to school, young people. If we can support them, those patients, beneficiaries, and improve their financial status, and they will be able to earn more and to sponsor more people, other ways that we can maybe do that. Thank you.
Right, this is perfectly placed, bridging question there. Any quick response to that, Andrew? You were nodding along there.
The simplest version would be come to our breakfast session on innovative financing at 7:45 tomorrow morning, because this is exactly what we're talking about.
I would add very briefly, thank you for the call out on technology. Technology has such extraordinary potential to be genuinely catalytic in our sector. We often talk in the Fred Hollows Foundation about the IOL. You know, when they built the labs, it suddenly democratized access. Technology is moving at light speed, and so there's a really interesting intersection between this financing conversation and tech that can either reduce cost or improve access.
Yeah, and these worlds are coming together. If you think about the cutting edge of an organization like the London Stock Exchange, the future of digitization, that increasing link between buying from an organization and investing in an organization, these worlds will start to merge. Andrew's got us thinking about what's still to come. Jess, any other things we should be looking at on the horizon if we think, okay, you've whetted our appetite, how can we keep having this discussion? How do we keep doing that? And is there anything else that you're looking forward to that you think, actually, here's a group, here's a way to keep this conversation going?
By 2030 or more immediately?
Well, I think if we're hungrier, if we're like, how do we keep this rolling, particularly over the next few months in the run-up to the summit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, the real effort needs to be around securing commitments for the summit now, because, and I think I've said this before, what's so critical about the summit is that we move the conversation on from what we should do to what we will do. But the summit is more than just an event. It's about securing that lasting political and financial commitment and legacy that is going to drive our sector through to 2030. And then I have some thoughts of what I'd like to see by 2030, but I'll hold those.
You're going to hold those.
Or do you want me to give them to you
Yes,
now?
I want, because otherwise we're going to get beaten by the clock, Jess. But
Okay.
that's exactly the time frame that we have our eyes on.
I have 3.
Go.
Okay, I'd like 1% for the 1 billion, i.e., can we get governments to commit at least 1% of their domestic health budgets to iHealth by 2030? I would like to see number 2, a huge, Adam's gone now, but he would like the plug, a huge investment into the World Bank mechanism so that we can really see that as a catalytic financing mechanism.
Yes.
Let's not waste this opportunity. We have the partnership with the World Bank now.
Yes.
Let's make that work. And number 3, I would like to see big, bold partnerships with the private sector so that we can work together to fix market failures and scale solutions sustainably. So
Love
that's my
that.
3.
So thank you, Jess. Excellent and concise as well. This is brilliant. So 3 final comments, Andrew, Anthony, and Ross. You can speak to that question of what we'd like to see, if we're going to change in that time frame, or a final thought within the session. Andrew.
So I'll share a short story because I think this needs to become everybody's story now, not just ours. Those of you who have ever been to the World Bank will be familiar that there is a sculpture in the middle of the atrium that everyone in the World Bank has walked past for 30 years, which is of a man who is blind being led by a child with a stick. And it was part of the river blindness program, the onchocerciasis program. And when we were fortunate to engage with the bank 2.5 years ago, the numbers made sense to them, the economics made sense to them, but they weren't going to remember it. It didn't feel like the heart was in it. And just off the cuff at the end of that meeting, I put up a photo of that sculpture and said, I think it's time for a new sculpture. Given what Jess was talking about, the bank's focus now is jobs and prosperity. They're moving away from poverty alleviation. So we said, what about a new sculpture where that same man is now carrying a stick and is digging and is working and is making an income, and that child has a rucksack on and a pair of glasses and is walking to school? And they got really excited by it. And through a very, very good friend who many people in the sector know, James Chen, that sculpture is now going to happen.
Yes.
So in the center of the bank, it will be their story.
Yeah.
So every day they will walk past this new sculpture and they will talk about eye care as a means to jobs and prosperity.
I mean, it's an amazing thought. I mean, to over-distill it, if you want to capture someone's funds, capture their imagination first. That's so powerful, and we're grateful to James and the team. Thank you, Andrew. Anthony.
Thank you, and I'll take Andrew's lead and use a small analogy. We are in this space where community health has been for many years, where we know it works, we are able to prove it works, but somehow we were not ever able to unlock the money for it. Using the Kenya example, we as stakeholders worked together on a vision that if we could unlock resources from the government, then we could sustain community health. And this happened with exactly what we are building here, defining the models, bringing in the innovations, and showing how this will work, and really preparing the ground for when we could get the political commitment.
Yes.
But we must then be brave, not only to talk to the ministers of finance, but also to engage the political class, which we did, and got the government to actually commit to community health at both national and county level. And this unlocked $50 million annually for community health.
And that happens person to person through conversation, through education. Thank you, Anthony. Just thank you for your 3 points, especially that 1% point. Ross, a final
very
word.
brief.
Thank you.
2 things. We're sitting here in 2030. If we've been successful, we have mobilised a significant additional stream of institutional money to support our work. So 1, that's what success looks like. We've got new money coming into the sector from the institutional markets. The flip side of that as a sector, we have actually lifted our capability to implement at scale. So we've become much bolder and more ambitious because we've got more money coming in. And there's a beautiful tension to get right there. Not all money is good money, and too much money too quickly, it's like a tsunami. It can do lots and lots of damage. But if we really want to engage with this opportunity, we've raised more money and we've lifted our capability.
Fantastic. And thank you so much, Ross, A, for the work you're doing, and B, for joining us as our co-host for this session. Well, as we break, let me just say one final thing. This afternoon's session has been masterminded in no small part by our colleague, Kerry Smith. So thank you, Kerry, for all your help, helping us come together, and for your thought and leadership on that. Thank you, everyone, for your brilliant questions. We're going to take a 10 or 15-minute break for tea. I'm going to be back in this space with our young systems leaders for 2026. But for now, please, let's finish by joining me in thanking all of our brilliant guests for this session. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Anthony. That's great.